Rex has been staring at the same spreadsheet cell for 11 minutes. He knows it's 11 minutes because there's a clock on the wall directly behind the monitor, and the second hand has gone around 11 times while he's been staring at the number in cell D14, which is 4,200, which he typed himself, which he has now been looking at long enough to start wondering if 4,200 is even a real number. It looks like a sequence of symbols. Everything looks like a sequence of symbols when you stare at it long enough. He moves the cursor, just to move something, just to prove he still can. This is not laziness. This is something else entirely. And if you've ever sat at a desk on a Tuesday morning feeling like you were watching your own life through glass, you already know what it is. Rex is the middle finger of the five. Dark red capsule head, arms permanently crossed. Sunglasses he wears indoors not because he's cool, but because at some point the fluorescent lighting started feeling personal. He has opinions, very good ones. He used to share them out loud. The office cured him of that. He is not the worst employee here. He might be the most expensive, not in salary, in wasted potential, which costs nothing to account for and everything to lose. What Rex has is called Boreout, not burnout. Boreout. And before you assume that sounds like a problem you'd like to have, let's talk about what it actually is. Burnout, you know, too much, too long, too hard. The engine runs hot until something seizes. Most people have been handed that framework, and it fits well enough that nobody questions it too closely. Boreout is the engine running at 15% capacity for 3 years. It doesn't seize. It rusts from the inside. And from the outside, it looks identical to burnout. Same disengagement, same low energy, same flat affect. Same quiet that fills the space where enthusiasm used to be. The difference is the cause, and the cause matters enormously because the fix is the opposite. You don't give a bored brain a rest. You give it something to actually solve. Rex's brain has not had something to actually solve in a very long time. Here is what his brain does instead. It runs in the background, eating through his focus like a program running invisible processes, searching for stimulation it can't find at his desk and therefore has to manufacture from somewhere. The sarcasm is not a personality trait. It is cognitive overclocking. The brain filling the gap with something sharp enough to feel like it matters. The eye roll during meetings is not contempt. It is an organism demonstrating what happens when you keep a problem solver in a room with no problems and call it a job. There is a specific phenomenon that researchers call the idea graveyard, and Rex has built a large one. It started 3 years ago at a quarterly review where Rex presented a better system for how the department tracked client files. He had built a working prototype on his own time. He showed it. The room looked at it. The room said it was interesting. A week later, someone told Rex the idea was a little too ambitious for where we are right now. The prototype was never mentioned again. He tried again 6 months later. Different idea, same room, similar outcome. 3 words entered a new grave, not the right time. After the 3rd time, Rex stopped digging. Not because he stopped having ideas. He has them constantly. They come to him in the shower and on the commute, and during the quarterly reviews where he now stares at the presentation instead of listening to it. He just stopped saying them out loud. It costs too much with no return. There is a kind of silence that looks like disengagement but is actually self-protection, and Rex has mastered it. Watch him in a meeting. He's in one right now. Ace is presenting something about Q3 alignment. Luna has been doodling in her notebook for 12 minutes. Hip is frantically cross-referencing something on his laptop. Dex has 4 browser tabs open. Rex has his arms crossed and his expression flat, and to a casual observer, he is the clearest evidence of disengagement in the room. He is also the only one who immediately spotted the error in slide 9. He didn't say anything. The error isn't his problem anymore. He learned that lesson. Think about what just happened in that room. A mistake is moving forward uncorrected because the person most qualified to catch it has calculated correctly that catching it is not worth the cost. Not worth the look that says, "Why is Rex being difficult again?" Not worth the 10-minute detour while the room decides whether his point has merit. Not worth the follow-up email that will arrive 3 days later, thanking him for his input, and telling him the original plan will proceed as discussed. The error will surface eventually. It always does. When it does, someone will spend 2 weeks fixing what Rex could have prevented in 30 seconds. The office will file it under process issue and move on. Nobody will connect it to the meeting where Rex said nothing. Nobody will connect it to the meeting before that or the one before that. Organizations track output. They do not track the ideas that never left the room. This is what Boreout costs at scale. Not just Rex's afternoon. Not just Rex's mood on the commute home. The compounding interest of a capable person who has been systematically taught that capable is not the point. The point is the process, and the process has no column for what Rex didn't say. The sunglasses help actually, not the light, just the distance. There's something about wearing a thin barrier between yourself and the room that makes it easier to be present without committing. Rex is here technically, he just isn't all the way here. He can't afford to be. This is what chronic understimulation does to a brain that was built for more. The research on Boreout describes something counterintuitive. Boredom is not a neutral state. It is an aversive state. The brain experiences it the way it experiences experiences mild pain, persistent low-signal discomfort that demands resolution. When the resolution never comes, the brain adapts. It lowers its baseline. It starts to accept the discomfort as the floor, and then it mistakes the floor for the ceiling and stops expecting anything higher. Rex's brain lowered its baseline approximately 2.5 years ago. He couldn't have told you when it happened. It wasn't an event. It was erosion. Before the baseline dropped, he used to feel something in the mornings. Not excitement exactly, more like orientation. A sense of here is what I'm going to work on today. Here is what I can move forward. Here is the satisfying click of a problem solved. Now the mornings feel like the same morning recycled. The same commute, the same desk, the same D14 with its 4,200 that could be anything. This is not a character flaw. This is what an environment does to a person when it consistently asks less of them than they have to give. And here is the twist, the part the office has never understood about Rex. The crossed arms are not attitude. They are armor. The sarcasm is not personality. It's scar tissue. Every organization has a Rex, usually more than one. The person who asked good questions and got talked over. The person who spotted the problem early and got thanked, and then watched the problem happen anyway. The person who eventually learned to keep their voice low enough that the disappointment, when it comes, lands a little softer. The office looked at all of that and decided Rex had an attitude problem. Rex looked at all of that and decided the office had a listening problem. Both things are true. Only one of them ever gets addressed. There is a particular kind of workplace loneliness that has no name and gets no coverage. It is not the loneliness of being isolated. Rex works in an open-plan office. There are people 6 feet from him at all times. It is the loneliness of being surrounded by people who are not working on anything that requires what you have. Of being perpetually overqualified for the version of yourself the job is using. You can be in a crowded room and feel like your actual self isn't really in there with you. Rex feels this approximately 90% of the working day. The sunglasses help a little less each year. There is something that happens to a person over the long arc of Boreout that doesn't get discussed, because it happens slowly enough that you can miss it until it's already done. In the beginning, Rex still thought of himself as someone with things to contribute. The ideas were there. The energy to back them was there. He came to the job with a specific self-concept, a version of himself that was good at solving things, that moved quickly, that saw angles other people missed. He built his identity around that. Most people do. You are your competence. Your competence is you. What Boreout does over months and then years is quietly decouple those two things. The competence doesn't disappear. Rex is still exactly as sharp as he was on day one, probably sharper, because frustrated intelligence doesn't stop processing. It just stops sharing. But the identity starts to drift. When you stop being seen as someone who contributes, you start to stop seeing yourself that way. When your ideas land in silence often enough, you start to wonder if the silence is information. When you stop being asked, you start to forget the feeling of being asked. Rex used to know exactly what kind of problem he was good at. He could have told you in one sentence. Now the sentence is harder to finish. Not because the ability is gone, because the muscle of believing in the ability has gone unused long enough that it feels unfamiliar. This is the quietest damage Boreout does. Not to the work, to the story a person tells about themselves. And that story, once it starts to change, is much harder to correct than a spreadsheet error. Here is the part that might land close to home. If you've ever done a task in 4 minutes that was supposed to take an hour, and then spent the remaining 56 minutes pretending to still be doing it, you've been a little bit Rex. If you've ever had an idea in a meeting and decided before you opened your mouth that it wouldn't matter anyway, so you closed your mouth, you've been Rex. If you've ever watched someone present something you thought of first and said nothing because the math on saying something no longer made sense, you've been Rex. Rex is not rare. Rex is common. He is the natural endpoint of a system that hires people's potential and then only uses a fraction of it and calls the rest attitude. The body keeps score of boredom the same way it keeps score of overwork. Different direction, identical bill. Rex has headaches that arrive on Monday mornings, not because he doesn't want to be at work, but because the gap between what he's capable of and what the day will ask of him is wide enough to hurt. The brain expects to solve things. When it doesn't, it files it somewhere and somewhere fills up. His productivity by the numbers is acceptable. He hits his targets. He misses nothing he's responsible for. He is, by every measure the office tracks, adequate. Adequate is a brutal word when you were built for more than that. The spreadsheet is still open. Cell D14 still says 4,200. Rex has moved the cursor twice in the last 7 minutes. He typed one more number in an adjacent cell. C14. He stared at it for a while. Then he closed that tab and opened another one. Here is what nobody told Rex, what the office was never going to tell him, and what might be the only useful thing to say at the end of all of this. The crossed arms kept you intact. The silence protected something that the constant disappointment was trying to erode. The sarcasm was a survival mechanism, and survival mechanisms exist because there was something worth surviving for. But armor is not a destination. It's a posture. And a posture held long enough becomes a cage with no lock. The lock is the assumption that nothing will be different, that the room will behave the way the room has always behaved, that the idea will land the way the idea has always landed. Rex has very good ideas. He stopped saying them out loud, but he hasn't stopped having them. That gap between the having and the saying is where something is still alive. Cell D14 says 4200. Rex types a new number, tabs to the next cell, stares, the cursor blinks, he closes that tab, opens another one, stares, the cursor blinks, he has an idea. He doesn't say it out loud, but this time, just for a second, he almost did.